Good evening, everybody. Good evening, good evening. Welcome to the Erudition Network. My name is Eddie Phillips. I am the founder of the Erudition Network. We are here every Thursday to teach you Black history and provide knowledge and understanding on our history. If you are coming into the program, hey, give us a shout out. Let me know that you're there. This will be a very, very, very deep lesson. Put out yesterday and a couple of hours ago that I wanted people to get online today, to actually be here, to comment and to listen to what's going to be said today. Because the information that I'm going to give you today is not general information. It's not information that is given in our schools very often. A lot of the names that we're going to mention, and I'm going to tell you tonight that I decided that I could not. I'm not going to be able to unpack this within just 1 hour, and I'm not even going to attempt to do that. But what I am going to do is I'm going to go through and give you some knowledge that has not been given to you. For you older folks, wasn't given to you in school, but yet you partook of the things that these individuals created. Some of your children right now are reading materials that some of these individuals that I'm going to speak about tonight created, wrote, and propagated out into society. And it is so important that we talk about these things as we see the world the way it's going right now, and people act as if they are surprised. But in reality, these things have been conditioned into us. They have been taught to us for years. And I struggled initially as I was going through this lesson and saying, who do I talk about in an hour? And I said, no, wait a minute. Why am I going to try to unpack it in 1 hour? So I want, and I'm sending out a reminder for people right now while I'm talking to you, if I know why I'm typing, because this lesson I do believe is very important. I usually tell people to come on and watch the replay, and if that's all you can do, please do so. Sit through this. But I need you tonight to understand how important this lesson is. So, see who's in. Hey, Taisha, how you doing? Good to see you. Thank you for being with us. Sean Anthony, hey. Hey, Grandma. I love you too. Oh, my God. Why are you elbow coughing? I love you too, baby. Oh, my God, Matthew too. All right. So let's get started on this, whether people are here or not. We are watching the confirmation hearings. If you have been watching the confirmation hearings that have been going on for, I don't want to destroy her name, Ketanji Brown Jackson. It is crazy that you have a Black woman here having to defend her humanity, her education. And I know we do this whenever we put people up to confirm them for the court, but this is a little different. Because what we're seeing for the first time is an African-American woman. And if you don't know this, African-American women lead education in this country. They are the most educated people in the country. Go look at any poll. I dare you to go pull it up right now. But what you're seeing is all of these people sitting there trying to question this woman's credibility, qualification. And that's on some level perfectly fine, because that's what a confirmation is. But on another level, when you ask me to speak as a woman, what are you saying? That I am not a woman? On another side, When we talk about, people get up here and talk about critical race theory and throw that out there as a part that this may be dangerous because she's going to push critical race theory. Do you see the madness that is actually going on in society? And then we have to ask ourselves, what do we do? Where does this come from? Why do people act this way? I'd ask you all, while you're out there, share it with somebody. We need people on here tonight. This information needs to go out live tonight. Share it with your friends. We're getting back to what we're saying. Tonight, we're going to talk about why we're here. How did we get here? What has put us to this situation? We're going to talk about the men, and I specifically talk about the men that deceived America. I don't teach master classes on race. Most times when I do a lesson, I talk to you very, very openly, and I give you as it comes what's going on in chat. And I'm going to do that again tonight. But I want you to challenge and to listen tonight. Who are these men that deceived America? And where does this come from? You will see on this picture that the first picture that I have here, there is a huge amount of men on here. In the middle down there is a man named Archibald Dunning. The Dunning School of Thought that came after the Civil War. The Dunning School of Thought that still guides our school books, that still guides our higher education books. Archibald Dunning was an educator. He was a well-known educator of history. He lived from the time of the Civil War, right, all the way into the early 1900s, 1922. And he educated a lot of people, presidents, heads of universities. He gave them the idea of the lost cause, the loose Negro, the reasons for Jim Crow and black codes. He gave them the academic dissertations to understand why you had to control people of color. To the high courts, to the presidency, to the heads of business, he influenced. And most of you out here don't know that. In the far corner there, you see a picture of Booker T. Washington standing next to Andrew Carnegie. Booker T. Washington, who was the head of the Tuskegee University. Booker T. Washington, who told blacks that the best thing for you to do is not to go seek civil rights, but to find jobs that work for blacks, for whites, so that you could keep them from wanting to harm or kill you. Booker T. Washington decided to create a university that taught shoe shinemen, people who did hair, taught maids. Some would argue that he wanted to get people employed, but I will also tell you that Booker T. Washington just wanted us to get along and fit along, and he took money from these people, the Andrew Carnegies who promoted and financed Tuskegee. Andrew Carnegie, one of the richest white men in the world. All of these people that you see on here, we're going to get into them, but they are the ones who have dictated the message for for the better part of 3 generations. I wanted to put this part on here too. Mark Twain was a great writer. I love Mark Twain. But there is a part of Huckleberry Finn, chapter 17 of the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, that always should stand out. And people say, well, why do they not want Mark Twain's books in schools? Because they're also a lot of times on the do not read list. This, if you've read ahead, is why. In chapter 17 of the book, you see that Aunt Sally is talking and going, hey, what took you so long? And toward the bottom here, she said, did something go aground? Did one of the steamboats go aground? Right? And said, it weren't the grounding. They didn't keep us back but a little. We blowed out and sealed the head. And she goes, good gracious, anybody hurt? And Huck says, no, killed a nigga. And she immediately goes, well, it's lucky because sometimes people do get hurt. Twain wanted to show you during those days, post-Civil War, as he's writing, how people still thought. The communication, the understanding that you are not human. You are something else. You are someone else. And when we look at society right now, the boldness that you see right now going on in Congress as we go through these confirmation hearings, you can understand that thought. Well, it's a nigga. So they don't get the same thoughts, processes, and considerations. That part of this is so important. And yet, many of us think that they don't want Mark Twain's books in here because of the word nigga. No, it's the way he used those words. It's the way he provided the message that makes people not want it to be included. Ladies and gentlemen, the issue today is so deep. I added this slide here before I get into the more modern time, because I wanted you to understand what you are not taught, what you don't know, but it's in your peripheral, it's mentioned. A couple of months ago, I posted these ideas that northern ministers, not southern, ministers who preached to congregations who were abolitionists, people who by that day and time were supposed to have a liberal mindset and understand that the black man should be free. Black man and woman. But when the Fugitive Slave Act started, when that came by Congress as a compromise, you saw that these people, these preachers, men of God, turned on black people, turned on the free blacks who were even in their congregations, sitting there listening to them. It's deep. I will only read a few because I put a few, but it's many. Reverend Joel Parker of Philadelphia, when they asked him about what should happen, should slaves be sent back to slavery, even though they were free men and some born free. He said, what then are the evils inseparable from slavery? There is not one that is not equally inseparable from deprived human nature and other lawful relations. They should go back. They should be who they are. Moses Stewart, the Theological College of Andover, a professor and theologian. Many Southern slave owners are true Christians. Southern slave holders, not slaves, are true Christians. And sending back a fugitive to them is not like restoring one to the idolatrous people. In other words, the people here. That though we may pity the fugitive, yet the Mosaic law does not authorize rejection of the claims to the slaveholder to their stolen property. I think the craziest one was Reverend Orville Dewey, in which he said that he would actually send his own brother into slavery, own children into slavery, if needed to be able to preserve the Union. Because between the free and slaveholding states and counseling slaves on their similar magnanimity, your right to be free is not absolute, unqualified, irrespective of your consequences. In other words, you don't have the right to be free. And why is that? We're going to get into why that is. Why is that I don't have the right to be treated as a man or a woman? Why do I not have the right to be considered? And so it's so unfortunate. My sons, I tell them that all the time. It's so unfortunate that human beings could have this thought process. These were people who were preaching in front of black freemen. They knew these people. And they told them, give yourself up to slavery and go back. Because as Dr. King said in one of his books, though you don't wish to kill me, it does not mean that you wish me well. That is what we're dealing with. These are the preachers, and at the time of the nation, the teachers. Before the industrial age, people learned in their churches. Those were the teachers, the knowledge providers. When you hear a reverend like Reverend Bishop Hopkins say it was warranted by the Old Testament, it inquires, what effect has the gospel in doing away with slavery? None whatsoever. So when you watch these confirmation hearings, when you watch what's going on in society with these churches, when you ask, how can Dylan Ruth walk into a church, Mother Emanuel Church, and blow people away after praying with them? They are deceived, conditioned, and unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we are too. We are too. We are falling into the trap. Baba D. Gregory once said that if you sit and stink long enough, you become a part of that stink. You start to forget and you ignore the stink. You don't even smell it no more. And pretty soon, you are just as bad as the stink. And the only people who will notice it are those who come along later and go, wow, you stink. Something's wrong with you. We have sat in the conditioning of stinking so long that some of us, when we listen to the things that are said in the media, when we listen to and see the things that's going on, we don't even understand the words that are coming out of people's mouths. Now, it's a lesson tonight. And if people are going to miss it, I tell you, you better share it. Because we're going to cover this. When we can't understand words, I put a chart on here to talk about the words, to show you the words that are used. Beast, cannibal, massive, beast mode, wild, stupid, dumb, he's untrainable. Man, she lustful. She's a slut. He's evil. He's violent. He's challenged. He's childlike. He's criminal. I feel threatened. He's too big. She's too sexy. We don't understand these words have been left, taught in churches, in schools, synagogues. People have been told these things. Young children have been told that it's the truth from educated, so-called educated people. I took 2 slides out of Charles Carroll's book. We're going to get into Charles Carroll. Charles Carroll has a picture here where he says, Christ, the Son of God, man was created in the image of God. Is the Negro the image of God? And he put a monkey-looking person next to a distinguished white man. He further goes, the Virgin Mary and the child Christ. Could the child Christ possibly be of the same flesh as the Negro? These are real books, words, teachings, ladies and gentlemen. Words have meaning. You taught that from the very beginning when you first start your life. Words have meaning. What you tell a child, they're going to regurgitate and push right back out because they don't know. And they start to accept it. They start to believe it. That goes both ways. The white child that's being taught racism, as you saw on that earlier slide, the very beginning, those are white children being taught hate at an early age. You may not see this picture up here at just the second one down. When you see the black woman looking out the window and the Klan is shooting in a house. Words have meaning. Let's get into Charles Carroll. Charles Carroll was a racist. He was a bigot. He was all of those things, but he was also a very recognized man. He's only one. He wrote the book, The Negro, a Beast and in the Image of God, or in the Image of God. It was a popular book because Carroll wanted to tell doctors, historians, men of knowledge, men of God, women of people, that his theories in the book were backed up by the Bible. The idea of the jigaboo, the spade, the animal, the beast, that sticks with us in our movies, that sticks with us when we see our young women dancing on the screens, when we see our children just completely lost in the idea of sex over relationship. When you write the massive size, the threatening nature. See, Charles Carroll wasn't considered an idiot. He spent $20,000 to create this book, his masterpiece. They called him a revelator. It was published by Book House, the American Book and Bible House, who still, changed name, but still prints out Bibles. He was respected. He was trusted. Everything he said was taken as truth to the academic, to the wise. But you don't know Charles Carroll. Charles Carroll pushes the ideas that are in our kids' school books. The beliefs of Charles Carroll are in some of these evangelical churches. Y'all quiet tonight. The belief that the Negro is not the son of Ham, that the black man has no place in God's plan because he ain't even human. He is something else. He is a beast. When you saw Roseanne Barr come out a couple of years ago and call someone, said she looked like a monkey.
This might answer your question.
When you saw the issue of Michelle Obama having to deal with the fact of them saying she looks too masculine, she can't possibly be a woman. When you look at the confirmation hearings right now and you see people asking you, and well, if you spoke as a woman, where do these beliefs come from? And ladies and gentlemen, these books are still printed. Don't assume because this was wrote in 1900 that nobody is reading this. This is important because we are still partakers of this in movies and film and music, magazines, talk shows. That's where this comes from. But let me tell you this. There are some that didn't believe Carol. W.S. Armstead, another name I know you probably don't know. He didn't believe Carol. He didn't believe that what Carol was saying was right. So he wrote a book in response. The Negro is a Man. Sounds wonderful, right? Sounds like he's supporting the blacks. And though Armstead, he argued with Charles Carroll that he was wrong about the Negro not being a beast, he didn't really agree that you weren't something else. Armstead wrote, and he pushed out to other people in the church who didn't want to go too far with Carol. And there are reasons. We'll get into that. He said that the black man and black woman was evil. They were degenerates, murderous, lustful. You have to be careful around them. They will pull you into sin. Armstead was a theologian. He was a theologian. I put a part of his book, I quote part up in his book. He said, I will argue that the brutality of such outrageous conduct as evidence of the strongest character that the blacks were not prepared for such social relations with the whites. For a strong man to meet an unprotected female in some lonely place, seize her person, choke her to instability, and rape her, and then in most instances, murder her to prevent detection, argues a beastliness, a cold-blooded murderous heart, a depth of criminality that demonstrates no fitness for equalization with beasts rather than with human beings. He also said that the Indians, though robbed of their country and in other ways swindled, never went so far as the black person did. We were evil. We were born of evil. That's what he said. And so folks, well, what's the justification? Well, you have to understand, Armstead from Georgia, he knew that white men in the South were laying with black women. And if I go along with Carol and say that they are beasts, then what does that say about our white people? We sleeping with beasts. So in order to justify it, the lasciviousness, the lustfulness, what he said was, you get lured into this. Just as the black man lured Eve. Just as that black Cain killed that white Abel. This was Armstead's thinking. That still permeates the church today. And why you can see people still treat you like you are something else. If you read in biblical scholars, black biblical scholars, what makes you think they're not reading white scholars? Teaching these lessons. I beg people to come on tonight. Because I know you I've taught this. And it's so important to understand why we're here. If I tell you're an evil, degenerate, murderous, and lustful, then I can explain away in my cognitive dissonance the Trayvon Martins, the Ahmaud Arbery's, the Jordan Davis. I can explain killing your kids, murdering your family, because you're not of us anyway. You're outside of the grace of God. How do I know that? Because more learned men than me told me that. They understood. So even when they argue for you, it goes back to what Dr. King said. Just because you don't want to kill me, it does not mean you wish me well. George Fitzhugh. And if you know these names, ladies and gentlemen, chime in tonight. Let me know that you know these names. I've heard of these people. George Fitzhugh was a writer, he was a businessman, he was a newspaperman. He wrote a book called Cannibals All, Slaves Without Masters. He also wrote books, a lot of other books, Sociology of the South. Fitzhugh was another person that was godly, well-read, understood that Negro. He thought he was a prophet. He thought he was here to tell people what was wrong about the abolishment of slavery, what was wrong about these free black people running out here. He thought it was his job to teach us, America, to be careful of that Negro. And then, if you read his work, he was so delusional into thinking that he was actually helping the black man and woman because he saw us as I put in that earlier, childlike, ignorant, stupid. So how can we let them go? And if you're going to let them go and get too far out, he actually said, put them down like dogs. If they get too prideful. His exact words, as I put it here, that the slavery rescued the blacks from idolatry and cannibalism. Have y'all heard that before? And even brutal vice and crime that showed them inhumanity. To him, we were animals that had to be tended to. Fitzhugh published this. He was praised for it. Politicians, leaders, coming out of Reconstruction said they lauded him. Fitzhugh even went so far as to try to knock down the black and tan movement because he knew that poor whites and poor blacks were coming together. So Fitzhugh said to himself, let's put them poor whites in slavery too. They ignorant too. It's true, Maddie. You're human. But that's not what he thought. That wasn't his beliefs. His belief was that the black man had a murderous heart. He was another one that talked about the waylaying of white women. He wasn't considered a racist. He was considered a prophet. That's what he was considered. A learned, educated man. I put pictures on here. See that brother in the middle? Remember when he was high on bath salts supposedly and he bit that white man's face? They said a cannibal of Miami. So white folks actually went so far as to say, well, cannibals. They come from people of cannibals. It went everywhere. It wasn't blamed on the drugs. They talked about the bath salts. Yeah, people go, well, bath salts wouldn't do that to you. It must be some predilection that he has to want to eat people. I put two examples of how they show us as animals, savages, beasts. Where does that come from? Now you know. Walter F. Wilcox. Ladies and gentlemen, I got a couple of slides on here, but Walter F. Wilcox is so important. He is so important. Walter F. Wilcox was put into place. He's another one that lived a long time. For you older black men who watch this broadcast, right? If you ever wonder where the statistics came from that says black men wasn't in the home, if you ever wonder where the original statistics that supported black-on black crime as purported by Dixiecrats and then later on conservative Republicans, that's your man right there. Wilcox was a PhD. He worked for the Census Bureau. His writings were inspired, though, by the folks that came before him. The Frank Hoffmans, the Charles Carrolls. He took those theories and he wrote about black criminality. I put him in this spot because I wanted you to understand what came before. He suggested in his studies that black men were more likely to commit crimes on whites. Does that sound familiar? They were also more likely to commit crimes on themselves. He didn't add in the fact that blacks were suffering from daily violence from whites who were breaking into their homes, taking their property, lynching, raping, and murdering them. He's the one that created the Negro entry, the American Negro entry, that defined who you are. He also allowed for experiments because he would suggest in his studies that we're more prone to the diseases and the vices and the things that are going to affect society, and that we would probably go extinct because we were so diseased and evil. And the reason why we had lived so long was because the slave owners fed us and clothed us and took care of us and allowed us to live this long. That was Wilcox. Statistician, lauded by presidents. Some of his charts are still used today. Today, when you watch the news and they say, well, the criminality of blacks, or the father's not in the home, and they go all the way back into the early 1900s, that's Wilcox's work. So even though they knew he was a racist, and that he trumped up numbers, and that he put out propaganda, it didn't matter because, again, he lived a long time. And he was able to be treated like a distinguished scholar and trusted. Because, ladies and gentlemen, why not? Why not? He's showing us what they really are. He's showing us who they really are. If you want to understand the depth of Walter F. Wilcox's work, he lived from 1861. That's before. Think about this now. For the end of the Civil War, to 1964. And he taught until the day he died. Cornell University being only one place that he taught. Amherst College, Andover. Lessons upon lessons of hate. That we don't even know his name, but we are still suffering from his lies. When a young black boy, a young black man, or a black woman is raped or somebody is killed, they trump up these statistics created by Chief Statistician of the United States, Walter F. Wilcox, and some of his acolytes that came after him. And they say, it got to be right. Because look at the history. But you don't know his name. Now you do. Dr. G. Stanley Hall. You know, when I did this slide, I wanted to make a circle. I have a degree in psychology. And in one of my classes, I wrote about Dr. Hall's ideas on Black people and how he came to his conclusions. Granville Stanley Hall was a friend of Sigmund Freud. If you look at the circle right there on the picture, that's Sigmund Freud sitting right next to Hall. Granville Stanley Hall wasn't just anybody. He's the first president of the American Psychological Association, the APA, still around today. He was a founder of the American Journal of Psychology. When we talk about the Jung and the Freud thought on psychiatry, he's friends with both of them. He's friends with both of them. He was a racist. And when everybody was writing books about how the Black man was, wrong in the Bible, he was a beast, or he was a devil in the Bible. And then some said medically, well, the Black man is this and that, and he may not be. Hall, knowing the mind as a respected person that studies the mind, wanted to give a psychological idea of what the Black man is. See, he wanted to explain your criminality that Wilcox and different people said. He wanted you to understand why it was. In one of his famous papers, he diagnosed the Black man's dysthesis, both psychic and physical, and erratic, volatile, changeable, prone to transcordial, intensely emotional, and epileptoid states. Now, for you who don't have a thesaurus, I did in my slide put it to you plainly. He concluded that Black men and women were idiots. And because we were idiots, we were prone to destruction. We were prone to do things that went against our better physical understanding because we were born as mutated idiots that could not control themselves. We listen to that today and we say, that is crazy. How could somebody say that and believe that? People believed it. The top psychological mind in the country, he wrote and told psychologists and psychiatrists and people who study the clinical understanding of Blacks that they are ignorant, volatile idiots, prone to destruction by their own minds. How can you dismiss somebody like that as a crank? It's hard because these are educated people. Supposedly, he was respected. And he went right along with the theories of the people we just talked about. As a matter of fact, the President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, was a part of these thoughts, these academic groups that sat around and talked about the Black problem. when you think about the fact that the President of the United States supported this thought, and I put it in my slide. Wilson was quoted in the Atlantic Monthly in 1901. This is what he said, the President of the United States. He said, a host of dusky children, insolent and aggressive, sick of work, covetous of all pleasure. Because he had to make it clear for those who didn't understand where erectic, volatile, transcordial meant. He had to make it clear to the people out there in the country that the top psychological mind, this is what he was saying about the blacks. And now we know because he's studied, he's known. It's hard for us to be accepted in the world, because I also want to make it very clear to you all out here tonight. This was the world too. Freud was over in Europe. If we're having these discussions, right? If we're putting this crap out, it's affecting the world. Hall knew what he was saying. And he knew what he was putting out. And he went and spoke in lectures all over the world to discuss it. This is why we treat the Negro the way we do in our country. Now you know. This one right here. Recently, my son is in high school, it's in a senior year. And he was tasked to read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. Upton Sinclair still read. People still praise him for his liberal mentalities. Right? People still praise him. That picture was in my general sci textbook, the chapter Freud. Because these people are still being taught, my son. And then we wonder why our society, right? Why the academics and the leaders and so-called in our society seem to read from a different history book. Because they do. Get it back to Sinclair. Sinclair talked about Chicago, and he's talking about the deplorable conditions in the nation's meatpacking industry. And it's a great book for people who want to talk about discrimination, but it doesn't talk about Black discrimination. As my son was going through this book and trying to do this lesson, I was telling him, I said, there's a part in the book in The Jungle where Upton Sinclair writes about Black men. Out of all of the discrimination, the horror things that go on in this book, he makes the quote in his book. He talks about the evil, that's the word, of sweet white girls rubbing shoulders with big Black men with daggers in their boots. This liberal icon of that time had no problem in talking about the deplorableness, because it's what they were taught, of Black people. You cannot compare him to Twain, because Twain was pointing out an issue of thought. Sinclair was actually co-signing a thought that this is something we should be concerned about. Even if you're a Lithuanian immigrant family, be careful of those big, tall Black men around your women, because they carry knives and they may do what? Waylay her. Don't sound too liberal in the understanding, but your kids is reading this book. They're still reading it today. I'm running short on time, so I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit to get through these couple of slides before we go into next week. Thomas Nelson Page. The thing about Thomas Nelson Page is that he was actually an ambassador to Italy under Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, again, one of our most racist presidents. But Thomas Nelson Page was one of the people who wrote about the idea of returning to the old wondrous South. Page was concerned that the old Negro black man was dying off. The old black woman who agreed and shuffled along with us and was friendly to us, they're dying off. He told the president, anybody that would listen, that the old blacks of slavery were dying, and that the new Negro, because remember, we talked about this, the new Negro came after World War I when they needed blacks to fight. But he said that the new Negro was evil, mean, thriftless, angry, insolent, dishonest. Those words again. Lacking in morality. And when that all doesn't fail, they go to the same thing. They will pray and kill your white women and your kids. So we have to protect them. That picture of him shows an honorable, justifiable, well-read. Look at all the books on his table, man. He wrote stories about lauding the idea of the caged Negro, the caged black man. He wrote short stories. One famous story, The Two Little Confederates. Still in your libraries today. But this man believed in the black boogeyman. He believed that the educated, worthy black person was a boogeyman, and that they were going to come do something to you or your family. He ascribed to the same idea that they were just beasts that were free. And in 1900s, when he was the ambassador of Italy, in the early 1900s, when you started to see fascism that was growing over in Europe, that would later play out in the middle in the 40s. He was there. Touching all over the world with this racism. But if I go to ask 5 people who Thomas Nelson Page is, they couldn't tell me. And some would say, oh, it's obscure history, Eddie. It's history that they're not supposed to know it. But folks do know it. How do we know it? Because of what we still see in society today. It's influence, whether they read it or not, it's still played out in our society today. The deception, the conditioning is still there. Let's talk about these last two. Robert Shufelt and William B. Smith. Shufelt was a lunatic, disguising himself as a man of knowledge. But one of his books stays with me. Years ago, when Minister Society came out, I thought about Robert Shufelt. When they put out that movie, Minister Society, I was like, there you go. Shufelt wanted you to know that the black man was a menace. That if we did not take care of him, he would kill himself and kill others. Wasn't a man of high education, even though the picture shows this Aquarian man who looks so intelligent. But he wrote books. People bought them. People believe what he said. Then there's William B. Smith. So I wanted you to see these respectful pictures that are still online for these men. He wrote The Color Line, a brief on behalf of the unborn. In other words, what he wanted you to understand is that you should neuter black people. You should neuter black men so that they do not have children that will later come and kill you or rape your children. You should kill them because they're stupid, idiotic. The words I gave you earlier. They shouldn't live. Because, see, if they live, it's only going to be a threat to us. He wrote that despite the fact of the inventors, right? The people who had came ahead of him, the Benjamin Bannekers and different folks. He didn't care about that. Let's not allow them to live to challenge our children. Who did these men inspire? Do you know what a Rhodes Scholar is? James Ford Rhodes? Bill Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar. He inspired men like that. Do you know who Ellis Paxson Oberholtz is? No. He inspired men like that. These are all people who helped to structure. And next week, I'm going to go further in this. Next week, I'm going to go further in this. We're going to come more to modern time and start talking about these men, because I only gave you 10 to 12 slides today. But there are many, many more. When you think about what we are dealing with today, one of William B. Smith's acolytes, John W. Burgess, now I'm going to get a hint on them next week. He wrote that a black skin means membership into a race of men, which has never by of itself succeeded in subjecting passion or reason or intelligence to anything. These were in school books. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to go too much over my time tonight. If you would like to do something for Erudition, I'm going to ask you to share this. That's what I'm going to ask you. I appreciate everybody who came in here tonight. I told my family I wanted them to be on tonight. It's so important to me that we get this information out here. Share it. Learn from it. Sit down with your children. Get on YouTube and the social media and go look up these people that I just presented to you. Come back to the channel. Look at it again. Pull that name up. Go Google it. Go research. Go study. I not only gave you the names, I gave you the books. Because I want you to know, as we go further in this next week, who these people are. And why they play into who we are, what we think we are. It has conditioned us spiritually, psychologically. It has conditioned us to think wrong of ourselves. It has made us believe erratic thought. It has our young children out here killing each other. It has our young women out here selling themselves. And yet people don't know that in the heart of all of these school books are educators who are the children and acolytes of some of the very people that I told you about tonight. A generation or two generations outside of where we are today. I hope you got something from this stream tonight. I keep telling people every week, you got to get involved with Erudition. I appreciate all of you who share our broadcast, because it's so important to know your history, to know why you're here, to be able to argue when someone tells you something stupid about Black history. And I'm going to close with this saying, with this idea that I saw in the confirmation hearing of our first African-American judge, Supreme Court judge, female. It is amazing to me that people are obviously sitting on television and making statements and doing things against this Black woman. And I watched other academic, intelligent Black people get up here and talk about the historical significance of this moment. The Supreme Court passed a law, it was a crusade, that said that it was okay, basically, for us to be lynched. What it said in the Supreme Court put out toward the end of Reconstruction was that it was not the federal government's job to get involved with stopping the deaths of Black people. That was a state's thing. And that the states, if they choose to not do it, well, that's their prerogative. They did that because there were no Blacks on the Supreme Court at the time. The Supreme Court, right, in a Dred Scott decision that basically said that there was no rights that a Black man had no rights that a white man was expected to respect. It's important to know your history. I will see you all next week. I thank you for everybody. I'm going to say it again. Share, 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 share. Go to YouTube and subscribe. Tell people to watch. I'm raising the bar, ladies and gentlemen, because we have to. We have to. Help me help others. I thank you for being here. Let's get others involved. We talk about a lot of mess. Let's talk about something that's going to help us. All right. I'm going to stop preaching to you tonight. I'm going to thank you again, and we will see you all next week.